welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. It's Maureen, your host. Today we're interviewing fan Janice Castle. She is someone who has been a mega fan of Sanditon. She has done her work too. She joined Instagram and Twitter just to keep up on Sanditon and to learn as much as she can about a possible Sanditon 2. So she was a wealth of knowledge, and it was a joy to talk with her. I think we're fast friends, and she is certainly a friend of the Sanditon Chronicles. So she will be interviewing with us, co-hosting with me on a couple other episodes. She was willing to help me out with that. So we're excited to keep having her on. We were excited to talk to her today, and I think you guys will get a lot out of it. And remember that if you want to be interviewed on Sanditon Chronicles, if you want to be a part of our episodes, if you want to co-host with me, please reach out to us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Mojito, M-H-O. Nope, that's not how you spell Mojito. It's M-O-H-E-E-T-O. Or you can reach us on our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. And these are all links that I will have in our podcast description. So even though I screwed up on my own Twitter handle, you'll be able to have a direct link right to those. So we really do want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear from you if your opinion differs from mine, if it's the same as mine. We want to talk with you about it. We want to make this a fan experience. We want to make this something where all of us fans can get together, because remember, I am simply just a fan of the show. An eccentric, almost obsessive fan of this show, and I'm never getting out of this world, and for sure, at least until they get a season 2. So join me on this and talk with me about it. We want to also make this as enjoyable and fun for you as a listener as possible. And I know that sometimes just hearing one person talk at you isn't super fun. So we want you to be a part of that with us. So reach out to us, let us know, and reach out to us anyway. Let us know how we're doing. If there's a different format you were expecting or a different subject matter you want to talk about, let us know. So on that note, we're going to jump right into the interview. I know you're going to enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking with it. It was just a very easy conversation, and it was easy to get lost in it. One thing you should know about Janice is that she loves the show as much as I do, and she takes about as much notes as I do. So this might be a long episode. It might even rival my first recap that I did on my own, which was an hour and 15 minutes. So I hope that you can listen to us while you get some work done around your house, or while you're out for a run, or in your car, or wherever it is that you listen to us. I hope that you are ready to hear everything we have to say about episode 2. So enjoy, and we'll talk to you right after. We're going to recap episode 2 today, and this is Janice Castle who's with me, and who is probably going to be guest spotting with me on a few different episodes. So we're just going to go through and talk about what happened in Sanditon's episode 2, so we can kind of get a feel for what's coming up next. So the first thing that we see in episode 2 is Reverend Hankins' flower sermon.
No, that's not true.
It's not. Don't they? Well, no, they're walking up and they're talking about the wind as they come up.
Even before that. And when I went back and looked at it, I went, this is so interesting. The first thing we see is Charlotte emerging from the sea.
Oh yeah, that's right. And then she walks past Theo.
Right, which is interesting because of how that particular episode ends.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's true. Okay, so yeah, you're right. That is how it starts. We see Charlotte coming out of the water, and then what I like about when she passes Theo, I think I didn't write that down because I was trying to limit myself. Mm-hmm. But when Theo, is he coming out of Tom's house?
Yes.
Okay, and then he looks really angry, and he's almost like watching. He actually turns to watch over his shoulder. So I want to know what happened in that house.
I don't know if it was so much that he was angry. It's just
I think he just always looked angry.
Well, at that point in time, later it changes, but he just, I don't think he saw her.
No, oh no, he didn't.
Yeah.
Because he looked away right when she was coming near him, and he was down before that, and then he looked away.
So I called this episode The Morning After.
I'm going to refer to that way from now on. That's awesome. So after that, we do see them walking through, and I like that Tom thinks he has a convert just because she refuses to call it a gale.
Yeah. 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 She says, gales are not allowed in Sanditon, are they?
I think that Tom is just so, I don't think
Enamored.
he's as crazy as he portrays himself to be, but I love that he puts that in his character.
Yeah. He's enamored
Yes.
with what he's doing.
So let's talk about that flower sermon.
Oh my gosh. Oh, I loved Esther and Charlotte's expressions
Yep.
when when he was given that sermon.
Esther's was
Oh,
my favorite, I think. I think
yeah.
I sort of would have, I think I would have had the same expression as she did on her face.
Yeah. Well, and Charlotte was just like rolling her
What?
eyes, and it's like, yeah, that was some sermon.
And I think it was so telling about each of the 4 women that were in there, because if you look at Clara, she's almost like she has on this air of flattery, like she's so excited. But then the next thing you see is Edward staring at her in that predatory way. So you have to wonder if she's only doing that because she thinks, oh, he thinks I'm a lily of the field, or if she's just trying to like make him more enticed by her. But that says a lot about Clara's personality, I think. Right. And then Esther just clearly does not care.
She's disgusted. She is disgusted with the sermon.
And then Charlotte, I think she wants to like it because it's a minister who's giving this message, but she just finds it absolutely absurd.
Appalling. Yes, I agree. And I think you get the impression that he realizes where he's going and that he needs to stop.
When he says you should be plucked.
I know.
From this one sermon, we see so much about their personalities. And Georgiana, of course, the whole time is just, I mean, how embarrassing to be called an exotic bloom when you clearly know there's only one single person in it that could possibly be talking about. And I just, every time I see her for the first couple episodes, my heart breaks a little bit for her. Because she's just so sad. And she's so broken. But then you see that contrasted with Charlotte looking at Georgiana sad, and then she turns to Arthur, who's a whole different character and a whole different breed. And he says, I love that when he says, why shouldn't men be allowed to sit as a lily of the field?
Right. Yes, that's right. Lilies of the field.
And then so they decide that Arthur's going to be a lily and Charlotte will be a toiler.
That's right. And spinner.
Yes. Yep. And you can see that played out. Of course, we're talking about Basu, but you can see that clearly played out in Charlotte through the rest of the series. She is a toiler and she is a spinner. And every time she loses her temper, you can see that she is the opposite of what this pastor thinks women should be.
Right. Hey, I need to back up just one step.
Yeah.
So when they're entering the church, I love that Charlotte just says good morning to them, and Esther says to Edward, "You've gone backwards in Miss Haywood's estimation, Edward."
Mm-hmm. And then he blames it on Clara.
Yeah.
That was actually the next point I had to talk about, that Edward, when he actually confesses to Esther, because that's of course the first indication that something is wrong. And then when they're in that, I hate their room.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's Denham Place.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be something that you don't really enjoy. They actually had it commissioned for that project, is what I read in the interview.
That makes sense.
But when they're in this deep, dark, really tiny circle of a room, and Esther gets him to confess that Clara did
what she did.
Yes. I don't even know that I can verbalize that very well.
You don't have to. All of us adults know.
But I think that her reaction is so interesting because it's almost like she goes through more than one emotion at the same time.
Right.
She's first irritated that he's not confiding in her. And then when he finally does confide, she's shocked for just a moment. And then when she grabs her stomach, she's sad that someone else has done this to her, Edward. But then it immediately goes into scheming mode.
Right.
How to get Clara. And I think that just shows you how much of a survivor Esther has had to be.
Yeah.
Her entire life, especially with the predator of Edward. She's had to be. I mean, she enjoys him now, obviously, and that's another thing we'll get to later. I don't really think she enjoys him as much as she thinks she does. I think she's just been groomed to believe she does.
Yeah, he's a manipulator.
Yeah.
And he uses women. So
yeah. And that scene too, when they confess, is a very rare moment when you actually see him truly bothered. When he grabs the bills and he says, "More damn bills." And he's not putting on his arrogance, because even when he's alone with Esther, when he's sitting on the couch reading her letters or he's kissing her on the neck, whatever, he doesn't seem exhausted or bothered because he's always wearing that mask.
Right.
But we see him freely right there be bothered and exhausted by the things that are piling up.
Right. And the things they don't have.
Exactly. And I think that's the one time I have sympathy for Edward.
Right.
In the whole,
Yeah.
and I think it was designed that way, but
Yeah.
I don't have sympathy for any of the time. But at that moment, I thought how hard it must have been for someone like him to have all these responsibilities. Esther can't work. It all has to fall to Edward. What does he have to do to get that money? And then you could
Right.
almost feel sympathy for his decisions of scheming.
There's a few other moments in the show that I do, but yeah, in that episode particularly. And Jack Fox was so funny because he was like, I just won't say anything bad about Edward.
Yeah. But then when we see Esther and Lady D, they're scheming together about Lady D is scheming of how Edward can get Georgiana. You can
Right.
see the similarities in Esther and Lady Denham,
Yeah.
which they aren't overtly apparent, I don't think, because Esther has this.
Right.
Esther
Well,
is
'cause for
almost
one thing,
biting.
Lady Denham is in control and has all this money, and Esther is not in control at all.
Yeah, but they're very similar.
Yeah.
And they both want the same end goal. And I think talking about how funny he is, when Edward is talking to Lady Denham, it's almost like he's talking to her like she's a child. And it makes me laugh every single time when she says, you do understand the difference between seduction and courtship. Well,
Yeah.
I hope I do.
He's clueless.
There's that line. And then when she says, you don't want to fall out of favor with me, do you? No, aunt. It just the way Jack Fox does it makes me laugh out loud every time he does it.
You know, we missed a scene.
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Go ahead. You can talk about it.
Well, and that's when Clara goes and gets the pineapple, gets that case that is so precious, and brings a pineapple back to Sanditon house. And Lady Denham pulls it out, and Clara's like, what is that? Is it a bomb? It's a funny line. And, you know, so she explains what she's going to do. And it's been raised for her by a friend at the Chelsea Physic Garden. And, you know, anyway, so it was a funny scene because she put so much into this pineapple. Like, it's such a precious thing.
Yep.
You know, it's I can never look at a pineapple the same way again.
Because of that scene, or because of the later scene with the pineapple?
The later scene, but the whole episode, you know.
Yeah.
And there's one other scene that we went over, and that was when Charlotte reads the invitation, and at Travolcar House, and Lady Denham, Mary says, what is Lady Denham up to?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yes. When Charlotte says, how extraordinary, and she says, and how unlike Lady Denham.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that Mary, that was something that we kind of talked about, was that Mary's personality is way more bold than people give her credit for.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's easy to see her as the meek wife, but she's anything but that.
And I do think that, Jane Austen in her book wrote her as a little more meek, certainly, than she is in this.
Yeah.
Series. Yeah.
And I think that if Jane Austen would have had the opportunity to write a little more, I think we would have seen her open her up a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. Because that's what she does with her characters.
And that's what she does with women, especially. Yeah. Jane Austen was really good at taking characters and writing them a certain way, but there's always an underlying strength in her women that she writes.
Yes, I agree. And she gives you perspective about them, like you were just describing.
Yeah. So I think eventually she would have got to this point of Mary. I think that Andrew Davies got there a little quicker than she would have.
Right. Yeah.
But I do like that line where she says that, because it shows that, one, Mary's not a meek mouse.
No.
But it also shows her concern for others, because she immediately knows that Lady Denham is scheming against somebody else.
Right.
And so her hackles are already up about Georgiana.
Yeah, definitely.
So there are, as I go through here, because I did try to limit myself, there are going to be some scenes I skip out. So feel free to jump in again and tell me when we're missing a scene. But then after that, we do see Lady Denham go into Esther and Edward, and talk to them about that.
Yep.
And then we see Charlotte become Tom's assistant.
Right. And I love that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And she's obviously knows what she's doing and he recognizes it.
Yeah. And I like, because at first, that's not a common thing for women, obviously, back then, to have that sort of skill set, to know that, but they do have to run a house.
Right.
But running a house doesn't typically involve bills for builders and
Right.
invoices and expenses and things like that. So you get a sense of who she is and who helps run her father's house. And then, of course, she says it later on the bridge that she's helping with that.
But also in the book that they wrote to go with the series, he has her check his math and find an error. The father does.
This is the book that they wrote to go along with the show, Sanditon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then you know that she is helping her father run the books at the farm, at the property.
Right.
Yeah, right.
And then this is also the episode where we meet Mr. Stringer, Mr. James Stringer.
It is. But before that, the way they meet James Stringer is when she notices the model of Sanditon. Mm-hmm. And I love that they did that. And they did a close up, where you could see what was envisioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that was a note that I put in there with the assistant, is that she affirms in Tom the greatness of what he's doing.
Yes.
Because I think Tom understands the greatness, but Mary is there to temper Tom a little bit. Right. So she can't really give in to every whim he says. And then James, of course, is his builder and Tom is his boss. So what's James really going to say yes or no to him? And then there's Sydney, who kind of thinks it's a fool's errand in some cases and is just helping Tom because he's helping Tom. But I think Charlotte is the first to truly, I think others have tried, but I think she truly affirms the greatness of what he's doing.
And appreciates it. She obviously has a real appreciation. I love it when she says, I've been trying to talk my dad into improving his, I'm sure she says father, improving his estate houses, for his tenant houses. And that was great. She obviously had a prior interest.
Mm-hmm. And I think too that, and we talked about this a little bit in recap 1, but Tom starts off a little more humble about Sanditon.
Right.
Originally. And here, because in episode 1, he says, well, I'm causing it to be built anyway. And here she says, who's responsible? And he says, me. And then he corrects himself and he says, well, I can't remember the name of the architect that he follows. But Nash. Yeah. He says, well, I take his plans and I modify them to what I like. So he's still kind of sharing that.
Right. And then, are you ready to go up on the bridge?
Yes, I am. That part, I think, is hilarious to me when Tom says, that was my idea, wasn't
it? and Stringer says, yes, it was.
And the expression on Stringer's face, though, you have to wonder if it actually was Tom's idea or if it was really James's prodding.
I think it was, but he's kind of amazed that it was.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it was his idea about the roof lines. That's what that discussion was about. Because she was catching on to what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's interesting too, because she doesn't live on the seaside.
No.
She lives out in the country. And yes, she's helping her father run his tenants' cottages, but she has never really been in a place like this before. It's why she finds it so magical. So that she could pick up on that tells you a bit about her own intellect and her own ability and her as smart as she is.
Right. Oh yeah, she's very smart.
Mm-hmm. Because obviously we said before, it's not typical for a woman to have that, but for her to immediately pick up on what they were doing without having any prior knowledge at all of it is
right. But even if you're not a seaside, if you're in the country, you still want to set things up so that you have as good a view as you can of your land, whatever.
But and I know that Jane Austen kind of wrote in there about how there was not really anybody in Willingdon. And so they didn't have a lot to really set up because there wasn't really a lot there.
Right. And so in the town itself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you can see Stringer is infatuated from the start. And that's where I think he remains, if I'm being honest. I think he remains infatuated, not in love. So I'd agree. Sidlot. So I love James Stringer, but he's not in love with Charlotte. He's just very infatuated because he's never, who in that town has met anyone like her?
Right. Right. Yeah. And I mean, they're good for each other. I mean, he's a good friend,
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's part of it is that she's a pretty girl who likes what he likes, who's interested in what he's interested in, and who's willing to be a friend and hear what he has to say. We can
And
see
not above it all.
exactly. And we can see with Tom that there's probably something at war there between Tom and Stringer where Tom's only willing to listen to so much of what Stringer has to say.
Right. Mostly, I think, because of finances
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
that Stringer doesn't know about.
Yes. I'm sure he has an inkling at some point coming up here soon.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Charlotte is willing to listen to all of it and not just listen to it, but encourage it and tell
Right.
him what a wonder it is of what he's doing and tell him how great and magical this is that he's doing this with this town.
Right.
And so I think that those are all very telling of all three of them in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did not put in the part where Tom and Sydney are talking. Do you want to talk about that? When he says, here's my brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So while they're up on that scaffold, that's where Sydney, Babington, and Crow are walking by, and Tom goes down to talk to them, and he approaches them because he wants to know what's going on with Sydney and how long they're going to stay, because he wants them to stay. And he's like, they were planning on leaving, and he talks them into staying longer when he pulls Sydney aside, which he does a lot. I think he misses the boat by not becoming more friendly with Babington and Crow, in my opinion. But
absolutely,
he's, somewhat at that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Tom has this great idea, but everybody else is doing the work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so, and it's at that moment, of course, probably the most interesting part of this episode is when Charlotte goes and catches Sydney to talk to him.
Oh, absolutely. That one is on my list.
I'm sure. Yeah, you couldn't miss it.
And I think too, in terms of Babington, because Babington has the same, he's not as high socially as Lady Susan is, but he's friends with the Prince Regent too. And
I don't know. He's probably there. She's a lady. He's a lord.
Yeah, but I mean, more people follow her in society.
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Than Babington.
She's more of a social creature.
Exactly. But they both have connections with the Prince Regent. And while Tom fawns over Lady Susan, he barely talks to Babington.
Yeah, which is,
so
he's grateful to him later, but
exactly. That's an interesting point. Now, Sydney and Charlotte in the street it's one of my favorite scenes. I just think anytime the tensions are high with those two are my favorite scenes. So I guess I can't say it's my favorite, but I think that Sydney said what he thought was necessary almost to, and this goes back to what I talked about in the recap of how Sydney is kind of a more self-loathing guy, in my opinion. And I think that he sees himself as a danger to those around him. I don't think he likes himself very much. And I'm going off of some other things in the future here, but that is my description of, that's what I get from Sydney. So I don't think he said what he felt. I think he said what was necessary. And I think that it's another facade of his armor.
Necessary to keep her from getting close.
And to keep him from getting close.
Right.
Because
I would agree.
In that first episode, he was clearly interested.
Right.
Or he wouldn't have, I doubt Sydney went around being that nice to women as he was to Charlotte in the balcony at first. Right. It just doesn't seem like his MO. He was clearly interested. I think he was protecting himself and her. But when Charlotte walks away after saying, if you really don't care, why would you take the time to be so offensive and hurtful? The look on his face is both sorry that he felt he had to do that, but it's also admiring her as she walks away.
Right. And I love that she left him speechless.
Yep.
Yeah. And probably the biggest line that we need to remember for future reference is Charlotte says to him, I hope you won't think too badly of me. Yeah. Because it's very important later in the series.
And I think his response is equally important. And I think that's why it's somewhat important later is when he says, I don't think of you at all.
Yeah, that's right. It's just very important.
Yeah. And I think that even when he said it, like, because his facial expression was when she first approached him to talk to him, he was a little more open. And then she brought up that night, and then it was almost like a door had just been shut. And that's when he got a little more verbal.
Well, it's interesting to me, their relationship, because I can't help but believe that nobody had told him how much she helped Tom and Mary. with the carriage and everything that her family did. I just get that feeling that he really didn't know. And so
Yeah.
this was just some interloper that was staying with Tom and Mary.
Yeah. And
I mean, he warms up later, but at this point.
And I don't think for Tom, it's an odd thing because I don't think he really, we talked about this a little bit in the bonus clip from last week, but I don't think Tom fully, or it's in the one from today actually, but I don't think Tom fully realizes or recognizes the people around them and what they're actually doing. I think for him helping with the carriage, that's just a normal thing. It doesn't need to be talked about anymore. It happened. It's done. We're moving on fully, so no one needs to know about this.
Right. But had he said something to Sydney about it, it might have smoothed things over.
Yeah.
But of course, the fun of it is that they didn't have it smooth.
Exactly. And that's that is in line with Jane Austen, right? There's always misunderstandings based off of some information being left out.
Right.
And I like that he kind of continued on with that.
Right.
Excuse me. I always have coffee and water with me, so I'm going to take a few drinks.
That's quite all right. So I'm going to go on to Denham Place, right? Aren't we there now?
Yep.
So this is when Lord Babington comes to visit Miss Denham. And she says, I wondered when he'd come sniffing around, which is funny. And I love the way that Edward just tries his best to ignore the whole conversation and irritates the heck out of her in the process.
Yep.
And I love when he's leaving, Lord Babington says, I will not be put off. You know, I love that part of that scene.
Yep. I like the part where when one of Babington's first lines is, if I may be so bold, your hair has such a glossy sheen on it. Like,
and your sister keeps, I mean, your brother is the one who she says, oh, my brother, you know.
That line, it's so awkward, and obviously must have been a popular compliment then, but in today's perspective, I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes, it would seem awkward, but you know, I think women had long hair in those days,
and it was often up.
Yes, and so for him to see it down and you know, so nice was not usual.
Yeah, and I think I love how she lays herself out on the couch just so when Babington comes in, that it not only appears to the best advantage for Babington, but it's also angled towards Edward so they both get a good view. And it's almost like, I don't think she has any interest in Babington, obviously, in the beginning.
Right.
But she's willing to use him.
Right. She's trying to get Edward to be jealous, I think. And Edward's like ignoring it all, or pretending to ignore it all.
Yeah. And I like that Edward is not Edward. I like that Babington is not deterred by the closeness of Esther and Edward. Because the average person, when hearing your brother is the one who does your hair, is probably a sign that something's not right. But Babington, at first he's a little bothered by it, but then he says, see an opportunity for me to do this for you. So there's nothing she can say that will deter him from him. And I love that about Babington. Babington's another one of my favorite characters, though.
Oh, I agree
for him
completely. Yeah. All right.
Next scene.
That's
I have Sydney boxing.
Well, it is Sydney boxing, but we go to that scene because of the fact that
Georgiana won't come out.
Exactly. Georgiana won't come out.
And I do like, though, that he was fully clothed in there. Which is, it's not unusual necessarily, but it kind of set the standard for him as a gentleman. So he's still boxing, but he still has all of his clothes on.
And his opponent does not.
Exactly. Yeah. And so Georgiana won't come out, obviously, because she understands why she's demanded to be at this luncheon.
She's going to be on display.
Yeah. And so when Sydney is boxing, he goes up there, and I think that Sydney is not as terrible as Georgiana says.
Oh, no.
We can see that in later episodes, but we can see in that scene when he's in a state of undress still. He doesn't have his cravat on. His hair's still messy. It looks like he's still sweaty. So it looks like he almost just put his vest and his jacket on, went right to Georgiana.
Right.
And yes, he's pushing her to go. But when he calls that servant out of the room and he tells her, I can't do anything about the climate, but you have to trust me on the rest. It just shows that he does have affection for this girl.
Right.
I don't think he understands how to fully show affection, but he
No.
has affection for her and he wants what's best for her.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I think Georgiana's view of him, I think, is a little teenage-ish.
Yeah,
And she's what, 17 in this?
I think so. She comes of age when she's what, 21? So she's
so maybe she's 19.
Yeah, I think she's 19. And so we do see that he clearly knows who she is in society. And he knows her worth. And he knows that she is more valuable than anybody else. But Georgiana also knows who she is on some level.
Oh, yeah.
Which is not the same as what Sydney knows about her. Sydney knows that she's more wealthy. Sydney knows that she has more worth. Georgiana knows she's a spectacle. And Georgiana knows that she's something to be gawked at by the white people, essentially.
And he's stuck in a no-win situation because he's trying to do what her father wanted, which clearly is not really what she wanted.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
you have to wonder if it's not what she wanted because of what we see in a later episode. If it's that romantic connection, and that's why she didn't want this, or if it's because she just genuinely didn't want that life. I think it's probably both.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think she truly knows what she wants.
No, I think that she just knows that if she enters into the society role her father wanted for her, she's never, this is going to be a convoluted sentence, but she's never not going to be a spectacle.
She's never fully going to fit in.
Exactly. And I think that there's some level that she understands that. So it's almost like, well, why not leave me where I'm happy and comfortable, even if it's not wealthy?
But he is in an impossible situation. And he said that really at the ball the night before when he says he has to do his duty. And she says, damn your duty,
Yeah. And you can tell then too at that, excuse me, at that first ball that he is just completely frustrated by her not understanding what his actual intentions are.
And not being willing to cooperate.
Yeah. She's willfully misunderstood him. On all fronts, on every occasion.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think that him calling that maid out too also shows his level of care for Georgiana.
Yeah.
Because that maid could have heard anything he said.
Well, there were two of them in there at the time. Yeah.
But he wanted that private moment with Georgiana to assure her that, hey, I'm here for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm on your side. I'm with you.
Right.
And then, so we're going to move on a little bit. So we see that Mary, when they first go to I'm skipping. You want to go to the next line? Because the next note I have is when they're at Lady Denham's.
Well, before Lady Denham's, we see Arthur and Mary
Diana.
I mean, Diana, right? Not right. Arthur and Diana walking and hardly being able to make it when the men fly by in carriages.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Which really upsets Arthur, I think Mary too, but Arthur especially. And so when they arrive at at Sanditon House at Lady Denham's, they are like exhausted, And we also see Tom and Mary and Charlotte walking, and they have to walk the same place, but for some reason it's worse from wherever Arthur and Mary.
I think they're on different ends. I think Tom is closer to Lady Denham's house.
Could be.
Arthur and Diana are on the other side of Santa, like closer to the sea.
Right. I've never memorized that floor plan.
I didn't either. I'm just going off of I think just the very first episode is the only time we see their house. But I know they always have to walk far to get to Tom's house.
And they seem to be near the cliffs, a lot closer to the cliffs.
Exactly. Yeah. And I like that Diana says to Arthur, think of the pineapple.
Yeah. If I can do it, you can do it.
That's their redeeming thing, is there's going to be sustenance there. And I love when they zoom by. Who is that fourth person in the carriage? Have you caught that?
Who knows? You can't tell.
That drives me crazy. I try to pause it there every time.
No, you can't tell.
Someone said it's a footman, but Babington and Crow didn't have a footman in theirs. Why is Sydney the only one who has a footman for an open curricle? There shouldn't be a footman. That drives me crazy.
Who knows? Because it's nobody that attended, as far as we can tell.
No, because Edward's already there with Esther.
Yep.
he went with her. So, but I do like too when Charlotte and Mary are walking up and Charlotte says, I swear it's grown in size since the last time I was here.
Yes, that's good. Yeah.
And there is a scene from the first episode that was cut where Mary and Charlotte are walking through there and they see all those pictures that Lady Denham
Yeah.
has put up that I think is important to how Charlotte feels about the house.
Right.
But I think the other thing that clues you in on is Lady Denham's personality.
Yes,
The
definitely.
more you get to know her, the bigger she looms. The more
Right.
connected you are, the more fierce she becomes.
Right.
And I think that's a kind of a foreshadowing of what's about to come and what's happening.
Yes.
So then when before Arthur and Diana arrive there, we see Mary is already starting to defend Georgiana before she even gets there. And Lady Denham's complaining about how the guest of honor isn't there yet. She's late. And Mary tries to distract her. And Lady Denham
Yes.
says, there's no need to butter me up.
Right. And then Mary says, compliments her, on the dress, which is when she says that line.
Mhm.
And then she compliments Clara's dress.
Yep.
And that for some reason upset Lady Denham. I mean, because she immediately called Clara over to her side right after that.
Yeah. I think that, and that's one relationship I've tried to really analyze because I don't think a lot of people look too deeply into that. I'm really curious about their relationship, but I think that Clara was kind of a puppet
Yes.
for Lady Denham, a source of almost like pride by proxy of, in the first episode we see Clara can play beautifully, play for us, Clara. And it's like, it's an extension of how great I almost said Lady Catherine. It's an extension of how great Lady Denham is.
Right.
And to see her being complimented apart from Lady Denham, I think is what upset Lady Denham. Like, no.
Yeah, May, I think you're right. But I also think that Clara is the only person that Lady Denham truly thinks she can control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not that she can, really.
Yeah.
But she thinks she can.
Because she's the one with the most need.
Yeah. She's the poorest of poor.
Yeah. And then the next thing we come in is one of my favorites of the series where Arthur comes in and Diana and Arthur just goes, wine.
I'm dying. And the other line I love is when Lady D says, it's you'd think they'd walk from Inverness, which is up at the northern end of Scotland.
Yep.
You know?
But I like that Arthur almost immediately responds to that. Yes, thank you. I'll pull through.
Yeah.
And
yes,
then
absolutely.
Sydney too, when that happens, I mean, Diana's a more subtle version of Arthur at that point.
Right.
It's fun to watch their personalities almost switch as the series goes on. But Sydney is, just kind of placating Diana. But then when Arthur says that, it almost looks like Sydney is trying to withhold his reaction, his facial reaction.
Yes.
Because he just smirks a little and then he immediately pulls him away.
Yeah, he's trying to save the situation a little.
And then when she says, what an absurd young man that is, Clara's expression gets me. Because she just closes her eyes and is just like, what? And it's almost like she's speechless. Like she can't even come with a thought of why he's so ridiculous.
Right. Yeah.
But that's Arthur's charm, I think. I love Arthur's charm.
I agree totally. I do too. Not that I could necessarily live with him, but
no. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? I would like to see him at balls and dances and then we're good.
Yeah, that's right.
At least at that point. Later on, I would like to be around him more. But then Georgiana comes in with her governess. Or it's not really her is it her governess? What is Mrs. Griffith's role? Is it just boarder or governess?
I think she is like a teacher. She's their instructor and they live with her. So she has a school for young ladies. That's what my impression is.
And I like that when she comes in and she says, I'm sorry, better late than never. And Lady Denham says, slightly better.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just, and that's another thing that's like Esther, where it's not an outright insult, but it's really clearly not a compliment.
Yes, definitely.
And Esther has that same dynamic to her personality.
And also Mary was trying to, make sure, well, I'm sure it's not Georgiana's fault. Well, we know darn well it was, but
yeah. And then
late.
As they all are being let out, I think Esther has some of the best lines, cutting lines in the series. And so when she says that line to Clara about her brother told her about her little tricks.
Yeah.
Of course, there's another word in there, but her daughter, Edward, told her about their little tricks. Where did she learn them? I wonder. It just, the way she says it And the expression on her face as she says it is so deeply cutting, I think.
Yes,
And I
and
like
then
where she does that.
yes, and then you really learn about Clara when she
Mhm.
talks about how she, you know,
The sexual
obviously
abuse she
she's
had before.
suffered. Yeah.
Yep. And they kind of hinted at that in episode 1, but I like how in depth Andrew Davies took that.
Yeah.
Because I think we really, one, that was a reality for women back then who were poor.
Right.
And I
Yes.
don't think that's examined enough. But that is not something that's out of the ordinary. That's not something that's too much. That is a reality for women then. And
Yeah. You
she
have
was
no
very
trouble believing it, that's
No.
for sure.
But you know then that she suspects some sort of relationship between Esther and Edward, which is weird because she seems shocked when she finds it out later. But she clearly
Yeah.
expects it there because she says we should not be enemies. How can
Right.
we when we're competing for the same thing? And Clara says,
Is this money?
money?
Yeah.
What else? So
Yeah.
she suspects something is going on there.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's when she begins scheming for how to use that. Because she's
Yes.
had to do that. I don't think Claire is an inadvertently bad character or a bad person. I think she's had to learn how to do that, how to use those situations.
Yes, and in the PBS interview that she did about that Lily did about Clara, she said she observes people and then so that she can figure out how to use them.
Yep,
And
exactly.
that's exactly it.
And I think that was something that we had talked on in episode 1, the recap too, is that's she had to do that on necessity for survival.
Right.
She
Yeah,
didn't
that's
have
right.
another choice.
Yeah,
She did have another choice, but it meant death, basically.
But especially prior to being at Lady D's, you know.
Yeah.
She
And there's
absolutely had to.
so much at stake for her at Lady D's.
Yep.
It could be from Edward, but it could also be loss of a comfortable home or a home at all.
Absolutely.
I mean, if she's the poorest of the poor, they likely don't even have a solid roof over their heads.
Right. Yeah,
So
that's right.
I think that's I really like that scene between them. So then we go into the lunchroom, right?
Right. The dining room. And I love that Lady D gets Lord Babington to walk her in, which I'm sure she felt like he was at her
the
level.
highest ranking. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why. And then of course Edward, although technically a sir is higher than a lord, you know, but it's her nephew and he wants her to court Georgiana.
And I think too that it's also that she's showing Edward, I know your value, and your value is nothing. So I think there's a little bit of that cutting there of her saying, you are not worth this.
Right.
She clearly doesn't think much of Edward.
No. And
partly rightly so.
Yeah, that's right. She's not being fooled by Edward.
Exactly. And Georgiana to Lady D, she's clearly, when she starts talking with the Antigua accent, she's clearly showing them she's not going to be their amusement or spectacle.
No, that's right.
That I'm going to show you. You're not going to make a spectacle of me. I'm going to show you.
Right. Yeah, she really lays down the gauntlet.
And I love how taken aback Lady Denham looks when she does it.
Oh yes, what an actress. You know, that was excellent. Both of them. I mean, it was really good.
Absolutely. I was shocked to learn that Crystal Clark was not British.
She's American. Yeah, she's American.
I didn't realize that until I saw the interview with her. But and when Sydney, when he says that's enough to Georgiana in that scene, I don't think that's him really being rude and being authoritarian. I think he's protecting Georgiana right then.
Yes.
Stop upsetting the lady of this house.
Right. You're going to make it worse.
Exactly. Yeah. So even in that, I think he's trying to protect her. But he does it in a gruff way because he doesn't know how to be soft yet.
Well, and how could it be different in that situation? I mean, really,
that's true.
I don't know how you could do it differently.
No. And I do like that Edward can't schmooze women of comfort or women of substance. He can't do it. No. He's able to do it with Esther, but that's only because he groomed her from the moment her mother married his father.
Right.
She is a woman of substance, but she's been groomed by years for him. But to any other woman of substance, Edward cannot schmooze them at all. They don't fall for his nonsense.
Right. In that case, she is really under his thumb, as it were. You know, I mean, and they're related. not by blood, but they're related. And so
Yeah.
they're kind of connected. I mean, yeah, until she finds another place to go
Yeah.
separate from him. But she doesn't see it as that way because of, like you said, he's been grooming her all along to believe that, he's the best thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see Sydney to Charlotte, of course, where he
Yes, I
says,
love this scene.
tell me your opinions. And it's clear that that last conversation they had on the street, that furthered his attraction to her.
Yes, I agree. And I just love the way he said it. So, Miss Haywood, any observations on the assembled company?
Yes.
I love the line. It was really good.
Yeah.
And her response is even better.
Mm-hmm.
That-
And I love when he says, perhaps I might, but then he starts to open his mouth and she stops him right then. She sees his intent.
Right, right. And when when he says, perhaps I will, after she says, why don't you be civil?
Mm-hmm.
And I love that she says, I've endured 2 long tongue lashings from you, and I won't court a third.
Yep.
And save your unpleasantness for someone else. Or better still, why not try to be civil? And he says, well said, perhaps I might. And then my favorite line, but not with me, pray. And she turns to
immediately
Mr. Crow.
Yep.
And the look on his face is the same one he had on the street.
Yep.
What?
But the only difference between that and on the street is before on the street where he looked sorry and also admiring, this time he looked amused and admiring. The sorry is gone, but I think he likes this interchange between them. I think he likes that passion that she's displaying.
Which is why he started talking to her, to begin with. Yeah, he's flabbergasted, though, I think, that she did it again to him.
Yep. And I think that it just shows you that his attraction is starting to override everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And that he doesn't want to with his head, but the rest of him is pursuing this to see where it can go.
Right. A little bit like Mr. Darcy.
Exactly. Yep. And the conversation about the slavery, oh my gosh, it upsets me every time. I mean, that was common for them, but why it upsets me is just again, this is an homage to Crystal Clark, the expression on her face when Lady Denham brings up that her mother was a slave.
Right.
And how she degrades what her mother did. For her to say, catches the master's eye, and then how do you even know that that's what happened? Maybe he actually loved her. Maybe it was a love thing, and it wasn't just a negress who was using her wiles to get to the master. I mean, so
yeah.
And I get the sense that Georgiana did have a good relationship with her father. And I think if she did, it had to be because her father had affection for her mother.
Oh, absolutely. I think that. Why would he really care about the daughter of one of his slaves if there wasn't more to it? And then you really know it because he freed them all.
Exactly.
And shut down, So yeah, absolutely. And you can kind of tell that everybody at the table is really embarrassed at what Lady D is saying to her.
Mm-hmm. Well, we certainly see that on Charlotte and Sydney's side of the table. They're all embarrassed. Even Crow, which is a little shocking. I mean, Crow's not a bad dude, but even Crow has this expression on his face like, what? But Sydney and Charlotte and Crow and Arthur and Diana, you can see their shocked expressions. I think Babington and Edward and Esther are more like, well, this is commonplace. Probably not okay, but it's common to have this opinion.
But still, it was shocking for her to be doing it right then.
Yeah.
And to put her guest on the spot. Mm-hmm. It was not good etiquette at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too that when Charlotte, Georgiana, and Lady Denham, that conversation, I think Sydney further approves of it because not only does he approve of Charlotte's medal in that, but he approves of it because Charlotte is defending Georgiana, and that's what Sydney's whole goal is he wants to defend and protect Georgiana.
Right. Yeah, and I love that she said what she said. I mean, it was perfect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the fact that he stayed quiet on it wasn't because he didn't want to come to her aid. I think it was partly, what benefit is there going to be if I start speaking on this right now? Right. She knows where I stand. I've had this conversation with her and we're done. We're good.
Right. But I actually loved what Charlotte said. I mean, and the fact that she's not pretending that she's not after a man. She really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
That is not her intention.
Yeah.
And that when she says, and I love the look on Esther's face, the way Esther looks
up
at
to Edward.
when she says, is a difference of affections not a type of slavery in a marriage?
Yeah.
You know?
She says that a marriage without real affection can be another form of slavery.
Exactly.
And
yeah. Equality of affection is the line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so what's telling there too, Edward does not move his glance from where he's looking.
Nope.
It's just Esther who looks up at him.
Yep.
And that's a little heartbreaking too.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Poor Esther, who just wants, and I don't even think it's a conniving thing. She firmly believes that she is in love with this man and this is who she wants to be with. And for her to be so rebuffed like that over and over and over again and to continue striving it's a little heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when D comes out and says, "How about it, Miss Lamb?" What did she think did she really think Georgiana was gonna say, yeah, I'll marry your nephew. Yeah, let's do it. I don't know if she was doing that just because she was like, well, it's blown now, so I'm going to embarrass her as much as I can, or if she genuinely thought that she could sway her that way.
I don't think she thought that far at all.
It's probably
honestly
true. It just came out of her mouth.
I mean, that there's not a lot between what she thinks and what comes out of her mouth.
Yeah.
There's not much in between.
Mm-hmm. And that is displayed later on in this episode where you see that it's oftentimes emotion that makes her mouth run.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just, I'm going to react. And that's almost showing her immaturity, where
Right.
she just reacts in tantrum because she's so used to just, it's my way or no way. And that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, no, that's right.
But then we come to, and this is one of my favorite scenes, we come to Arthur saying, "Ha, well done, Miss Lamb, we ain't suited." And then he cuts the pineapple. First, you see the look on Arthur's face, which is, Turlo has just gotten amazing expressions. And as he's cutting it, I can't even describe what his face looks like, but it's so amazing. And it makes me laugh every time.
He's like, he is not stopping.
No.
He is. This is his purpose. He came for the pineapple. It's time for the pineapple.
I walked all this way. I'm going to eat it. And then you see Tom in the background. Even Tom is a little taken aback by how Arthur is acting right then. And Tom has no idea what to do at all.
And Charlotte too, her face is like.
And then when the pineapple drops onto the plate. But the part I love about the scene the most is when he says it's rotten, Lady Denham, to the core, and it cuts to Esther and she's laughing. But then you see Babington watching her out of the corner of his eye and he's starting to smile.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite scenes from right at that moment. So subtle, but it's so great. And it makes you have a certain love for Babington that he appreciates that in Esther.
And besides Charlotte and Sydney and their interaction and just the acting that happens between them, the acting that happens between Esther and Babington, or Mark Stanley and Charlotte Spencer, is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely a very real chemistry there too.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's another aspect where a lot of the things I really, really like about that luncheon scene is nonverbal.
Yes. Yeah.
There's the expressions on their faces when they talk about slavery. There's the expressions on their faces when he's cutting open the pineapple. There is even the body language between Edward and Esther and Babington and Lady Denham. You can tell that Lady Denham is getting more worked up by how she fidgets in her chair more. That was really hard to say. She fidgets in her chair more, but also the expression on her face is more and more irritated as the conversation drags on.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that Charlotte Spencer and Mark Stanley did a great job with the nonverbal scene right there.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think it's super poignant and it tells you more about who his character is, because Babington's character is actually a really good guy.
He is. Yeah. He's one of my favorites.
Yes. He has the appearance of a rogue because he hangs out with Crow and he drinks, but he's actually a good guy. So then we move on. The luncheon is done, right? Once Arthur cuts into the rotten pineapple, the luncheon's
Right.
over, and they're all heading outside. And I love when she says, Mr. Parker, and all three of the boys turn and look at her. And, no, not you, Mr. Tom Parker. And when she goes in there and starts haranguing him, you actually see some backbone in Tom right there.
Yes.
Because he's not laughing with her. He's laughing at her as she complains about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think when he realized, oh crap, I'm doing this and I think that's part of why she said, think on this. I am my own woman. I think part of that was because he's laughing at me. I'll show him. You don't laugh at me. You don't do this to me. I think that was the moment he realized that he can't remembered that he can't have a backbone with her.
Right. Right.
Everything hinges on her.
Yeah. And it really hits him later when he gets home and they're talking about it. But one of the scenes I love is when the three brothers are leaving and she calls Mr. Parker and they all turn around.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a great bit, a little tiny thing that they did. But then you see all three brothers and, Mr. Parker.
Yep. And I like even the expressions on each of their faces match.
Yeah.
Tom looks resigned. Sydney shows him some almost sympathy. And Turlo's just kind of like, yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So I think that Lady Denham, she threatens him with a pullout. And I think it's all a power move. There's no merit behind that. I think Lady Denham is invested in Sanditon because that's where her money's at. I don't think she would ever actually pull her money out. I think in episode 8, she considers it. But right in that moment,
right. I agree. She uses it as a power play against Tom.
100%.
All the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I agree. It's a power play. And he can't just thumb his nose at her, but
yeah, he doesn't have a choice because he's so deep in it. He doesn't have a choice.
Right.
It would be better to play it safe and do as she requests rather than risk losing it if she actually did have a temper tantrum or remove it all.
And what kind of investment agreement would you have if somebody could just pull out on a whim?
Exactly. Yeah. So right after that conversation, we do see Georgiana in her room. And that's a very sad scene.
It is. And she throws her necklace down. Yeah, that's
again that's a wordless scene. There's no words to it, but there is so much in that scene.
Strife. Yeah.
Did
we see that scene before? No, before we see Mary and Charlotte and Tom discussing.
Yeah.
Okay, I couldn't remember the exact order.
Yeah, because I think the idea is that we go to Georgiana right before Tom gets back home.
Okay.
But her in that scene, I think the benefit of her pacing is one, she has no refuge.
Right.
She feels she doesn't. So she's stuck in this whole little tiny room. She's a caged, basically an animal. I mean, that's kind of what they viewed her as.
Oh, yeah.
She's a caged animal in this room who is just made an enormous spectacle of. And she's heartbroken. And she's once again, I think she does feel let down by Sydney in that moment.
And just the whole situation.
Yeah. But Sydney was the only one she had a relationship with going in there.
Right.
So I think that every time she feels hurt and Sydney is even a minuscule part of it, it's all pinned on him because he's the one she has a connection to. And I think that that's what really, really fueled her throughout the series. I think that's what fueled her irritants, her dislike, almost her anger at him was started right then. She was already angry at him.
19, but it sure reminds me of teenagers.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, it's like, anyway. Well, but on the other hand, certainly Miss Griffin's never stands up for her either.
No. But I don't know how much, I think that my understanding from the book, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but my understanding from the book is that she didn't really have much of a connection with Mrs. Griffiths before she came to Sanditon.
No, I think you're right. That's entirely right. But you would think if somebody was your, the person you were taking care of for this period of time, but she's not that kind of person anyway.
Yeah. And I think we see too that she is viewed as her jailer, right?
Right. Absolutely.
She's not really viewed as her guardian or her caretaker. She's viewed as someone who keeps her accountable. Someone who keeps her in line.
Especially after this scene, after this things that are coming up. Absolutely.
You can see too how little she cares about her wealth when she rips off that most like, I mean, I'm sure maybe in costumes it wasn't expensive, but it was supposed to be a real necklace.
Yes.
So the way she rips that off and throws it, she does not care one iota for money. What she cares about is she's made to feel less than human everywhere she goes.
Right. Right. Yeah. On the one hand, she'd like to be back at Antigua, but the reality of that might not be what she really wants.
Exactly. The grass is always greener on the other side, right? You
Yeah,
long for
I was
what's there.
happier then, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the way it is at the point at which she left. Who knows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
So
go ahead. Because I actually don't have the scene where he's talking with Mary. I go right into when Charlotte goes to Lady D's house.
okay, so one of the things I like about this scene is Tom's describing to Mary and Charlotte his conversation with Lady D, and they can hardly stop from laughing.
Yep.
And I understand that when they were filming it, they kept cracking up. It took them way longer to it should have, because of how they kept cracking up.
Yeah.
And and Tom's trying to have a straight face to say what Lady D was so upset about, but he can't even do
No.
it. The appalling old woman, which is exactly what she is.
And I like the way and you can tell that, I mean, obviously it was a script, but the way, not Chris Marshall, but the way that Tom says it is so great when he's making it clear to everyone in the room that he understands how absurd it is when he says that, because I think it's when Charlotte says, I feel this is my fault. No one has stood up for her except for your brother. Well, she's mad at him too. Not so much for what he said, but as for the way he handled her pineapple.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And the way he says it is like the absurdity is just like, and you can tell in the next line where he actually groans.
Right.
He says, "Oh, she is an appalling old woman."
Yeah, yeah.
So I like that they put that in there because it shows that Tom is not just blindly bowing to this woman because she's Lady Denham, but he makes it clear that I understand she's absurd. I understand her requests are ridiculous, but she holds the fate of my family in this town in her hands, and I have no choice but to do what she asks.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And so then the next scene is Charlotte going out there, right? The next scene is Charlotte going to Lady D's house. And I think Lady Denham sees her strength. So she doesn't allow her to stay quiet with her opinions. No. I think that I don't think I can see at the luncheon because she says, you don't offend me. You amuse me. I like to provoke and I like to tease. She was not provoking and teasing at that luncheon. She was provoked. So she was being cruel because she was provoked, she felt.
And she is just excusing her behavior the day before.
Absolutely.
By doing that, saying that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that with like-minded people, she does like to provoke and tease. And I think that she sees Esther eventually and Charlotte as her equal mentally. So I think that she sees Charlotte's strength and she sees that she has her own mind. And I think that's why she does not allow her to stay quiet in her opinions. Because Charlotte would have very happily walked out of the without saying anything. Right. Lady D was the one who didn't allow that to happen.
And also one of the things I love about Charlotte is that Charlotte offered to go and apologize.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She was willing to humble herself and go apologize. And she didn't she did it in a good way because she said, my behavior was regrettable, which, but the Lady D couldn't leave it at that, of course.
And I think too, that with Charlotte saying, Mr. Parker sent you here, no doubt. I think that she didn't want to absolve Tom from wrongdoing because I think she wanted to have a reason to stay mad at him to continue to hold that over his head. Mm-hmm. And so for Charlotte to say, no, I came of my own will, her fighting that was basically saying, stop looking for excuses to stay mad at him. Because that line where she says, what Charlotte says, no, whether you believe it or not, it's the truth. And Lady Denham says, you can't help it, can you?
Yeah.
What Charlotte says there is not really overtly offensive or out there. So you have to imagine that she's reading between the lines of Charlotte saying, you have no reason to hold Tom accountable for this. And it's convicting her and it's keeping her accountable for it.
Right. And eventually she says, he has nothing to fear from me now.
Exactly. Yeah. For now. Yep.
and I love that Charlotte got across her point about how Lady D was mistreating Miss Lamb.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Lady Denham, I think that she saw the truth of what she said.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's why she let her off the way she did. Because, okay, well, you were right. I probably shouldn't have. Because Lady D is not stupid. And she's not ignorant of her behavior.
And it was counterproductive to what she wanted to do.
Exactly.
And why she had the luncheon in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And then the next scene that we see is Georgiana trying to get on the coach.
Yes.
Now, here's one thing that kind of gets to me is because we're sort of they're trying to make us see it as a race issue, which of course her having to ask permission to get on there was, because the coachman had to say, no one has a problem with that, do they? So it is partially a race issue, but no coachman would allow anyone on their coach with a promise to pay later.
Oh yeah.
It just, there's no way. And I think too, another thing that showed was her actual very real need for a guardian.
Oh yeah.
Later on, she says, if I'm a woman of fortune, that means I must have a guardian. But she needs a guardian because as a woman, she wasn't allowed to know certain things or be a part of certain things. And she genuinely, I don't think, understood that there's no coachman on earth who would take me with no money.
Right.
I think she genuinely just thought her name alone would get her. I mean, that's made clear when she says, don't you know who I am?
Right.
But it just shows that she has
little experience with this stuff.
Very little experience, and obviously zero access to her money, as you said.
Right.
So I think that just proves her need for a guardian. And then
which
the next
was probably intentional so that she wouldn't run off.
Exactly, yeah. And then the next scene we see is them in the hotel bar, right? Babington, Crow, and Sydney.
Right.
And this is where Babington even more proves his worth while talking to Crow. Right. When Crow says, you're going to bring her to heel. And Babington says, bring her to heel? She's not a dog, Crow. She's a young lady.
Right.
And that just shows that that's abnormal for a lord, right? To view women as more than property.
Right.
And he did.
Right. Especially at this day and age.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I, of course, love when Crow was talking about women who were exciting, and he says that Miss Haywood, and the look on Sydney's face.
Yes.
Clearly, Sydney has thought about that. I mean, clearly he has.
Right. She has spunk.
Yes. And so right there, Sydney betrays his interest in Charlotte. I don't think he meant to. I think he meant to try to keep it concealed as long as he could. But that's how deep his interest goes when he betrays it without even trying.
Right. And then it just adds fuel to the fire when Crow talks about Miss Lamb, and then he has a perfect excuse to blow up at him. You know, because he's talking about being in bed, and you know if he had only talked about Georgiana, had not talked about Charlotte, would he have blown up quite so badly?
I don't think as badly. I think he still would have had a reaction to it though, because he genuinely does want to do that.
Right. No, I agree, but I think it added fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And I think too that when he talks about Georgiana, after he yells at Crow and he says, you know, if I might ask without getting my head bit off, what is your situation there? I think that Sydney shows he's understood all of Georgiana's qualms.
Oh yeah.
That he's not ignorant of, he says he's trying to keep her safe, but he knows exactly why she's unhappy. But he also doesn't see another way out of the situation to keep her safe.
Right.
And that's when Crow has rare insight. And I love that line where Sydney says, anything can happen in London. And Crow says, anything can happen anywhere. But it's the tone of his voice and the way he says it that almost makes you believe that he has a personal connection with that statement.
Yes. Yes. And I especially love when Babington says, and she doesn't like you very much either.
Yes.
To Sydney, you know.
Because they're both, I think that Babington is obviously very observant.
Oh yeah.
But I think Crow is deceptively observant. I mean, we see him as a drunk.
Right.
He notices things sometimes before he gets hammered. He notices things.
He has great lines. He's part of the later on when he has that mask on at the ball that looks like a jester. I always think that's it. He's the jester.
Yep.
You know,
he does have some great lines in there. So then he has rare insight to that. And I just love how he says that. In the next scene we see, of course, it's a perfect, Sydney goes off on the cliffs. I actually didn't talk about Tom coming in. If you want to talk about that, I was just going to go right to Georgiana on the cliffs. Do you want to talk about Tom coming in the bar?
Yeah. When Tom comes in the bar, it's obvious he has not talked with Charlotte, because Charlotte would have calmed him down and said, she's not going to do anything, but he hasn't talked to Charlotte. And he once again is just besought with worries. But I really hate the fact that he can't sit down and have a drink with those other guys
Yeah.
because it tells you really how socially inept he is.
Yeah.
And instead, he ostracizes them, and then he wants them to stay and participate in his scheme. It's very short-sighted of him.
Yeah. And I think that we can see in Tom's character because he never outright asks anyone for money. He asks the
No.
banks for money repeatedly. But even when Sydney offers it, he says, no, you can't do
Right.
that. So I think with Babington and Crow, I don't think he wanted it to be a handout. I think that he just wanted them to see how great Sanditon was on their own and see that Sanditon itself has great merit. And
And he wanted him to rent apartments, but still, you don't go treating him like
you have to
that.
schmooze a little bit.
Exactly.
And Sydney understood that. And I think that's part of why Tom partnered with him, because Sydney says, this is how I work.
Right.
Like Babington and Crow can't be bullied into it.
Right. And Tom needs to back off on the things he says to Sydney. I mean, it doesn't exactly make you want to help
No,
him.
it puts the burden on his feet.
Right.
And I think that's something I talked about in the episode that aired today, although when this comes out, it will have been last week, is that can you imagine if Mary wasn't there, if Mary didn't exist? How often would Sydney want to come back if all he got was Tom harassing him to ask banks for money every second of every day, and there was no comfort from Mary? Like there's
not at all.
So I agree with you there.
The kids too, as we find out in the next episode.
Yeah. So after that, Sydney leaves to go on his swim, and Crow again has another line of, you can exercise indoors, So
yes, I love that.
And you don't see him say it, which I think is great cinematic, but Crow just has the greatest lines. And he wants, I think part of Crow's job in their friendship is to release Sydney from some of the burdens he carries.
Yeah,
I think
at least that's how he sees it.
Yeah, I think most of the stuff he does and says, I think his role as a friend is to bring levity to Sydney.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
So the next scene we see,
but actually, we need to back up.
Okay.
Because even before that scene where Sydney says, "I'm going to take fresh air and embracing exercise," Charlotte has found Miss Lamb on the cliffs.
Yep, that's what I was going to dive into right now.
Yes,
I was going to talk about the whole cliffs as one.
Okay.
So we do see that that Georgiana is at first she's wandered for a while because she's gone from town to the cliffs.
Right.
So she is standing out there, and I think that at first, the very first time I ever watched it, I thought, oh my gosh, is she going to jump?
I thought the very same thing.
But then we can see that when they zoom in on her face after Charlotte finds her and she comes up and catches her backwards, I don't think that that's really a thought in her mind. I think it's almost kind of like her in a room where she's caged. I think she feels caged in by the sea. And I think she's staring out at this. I think she sees it the way Esther does, as this bleak, desperate thing that's before her, that's keeping her locked in on this place. She can't get out. She has no way out.
Well, when she was on the island, she probably had a better relationship with the sea when she was in Antigua. But yeah, and my concern would be, would she have fallen in?
Yeah.
Not necessarily jumped in, but would she have fallen
Because she did just kind of fall into Charlotte's arms.
Yeah. And so it's great that Charlotte catches her, and then they were able to talk about how Charlotte truly befriends her.
Absolutely.
Charlotte needed a friend, but also Georgiana really needed a friend.
And I think Charlotte was intuitive enough to know that. I think she reached out to her because she could sense that she was also lonely, because Charlotte says, I've experienced a bit of that myself.
Right.
But I think Charlotte's heart is the same as Mary's, where she wanted to befriend someone who really needed a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's good that as they're walking along, Georgiana admits that being in possession of a fortune, I must be managed.
Yeah. And I think she sees it as something that's more ridiculous, that I have to manage because I'm a woman who has money. But I think it's also good that she openly admitted to, because although you can look at her and see why she's feeling this way.
Right.
But Georgiana gives voice to it when she says that people don't look at me the same way they look at you, right, to Charlotte. And you can I think her giving voice to that helps her to get through it, especially with Charlotte, who is allowing her to be exactly who she is. And you can see that when Georgiana says, "Do you find me very sulky?"
Mhm.
And
And
what's the other word she uses?
spoiled.
Sulky and spoiled. Yeah. That she really genuinely has this fear that people might see her that way, other than the real reason for her heartbreak.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, her people lash out, and Georgiana is rightfully reacting to the pain that is inflicted on her over and over and over and over again. And I think that Charlotte allowing Georgiana to be herself, you have to wonder if that's the first time ever, other than Otis, where she was allowed to really, truly be herself. And I think that Charlotte fights to shine light on the good in the midst of the bad. Because
Yes, she does.
when they're walking along the clifftop, she says, "Yes, but I don't think Lady Denham actually meant harm." And then she
Right.
brings up Arthur, and
Right.
Georgiana says, "He's a silly man." And Charlotte says, "But good-hearted, I think."
Yeah.
So she's trying to help Georgiana. She's facilitating this idea that there is good, even though it feels bad, there's still good that you can focus on here. There's still people who want you to succeed. You're not alone.
She has the opposite view of Sanditon from what Esther had to say in the
Yep.
first episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she has a positive view.
Yeah, I think that where Esther feels caged in by the sea and sees something that's almost jailing, I think Charlotte sees the freedom of the sea.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting play. And right in the middle of this, between her finding Georgiana on the cliffs and her and Georgiana walking along the cliffs, we see Edward talking to Esther.
Right.
And he just assumes Esther's upset about Georgiana. But I don't think it is. I don't think she thought Georgiana was really a threat. I think that what she's upset about is Clara and her words that she said to her in the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And I think you can kind of see that and it shows how unfocused Edward is on Esther.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Where he says, "It wouldn't have come to anything. I wouldn't have actually married her." I don't think she thought you would actually marry, or rather, I don't think she thought Georgiana would really go for Edward, is really what I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what she's upset about are the things that Clara said to her.
Right.
Before the lunch.
And she just wants some affection from Edward, I think.
Exactly.
I love her collar.
Oh,
I love that. Oh,
yeah.
It's beautiful on her. It's just such a,
especially against the backdrop of her red hair. That was delightful. I love that.
Yeah.
So back to kind of where they're on the cliffs, where Stringer passes them.
Yes, and they're walking along.
Yep. And he says, "Good day, Miss Haywood." She says, "It is. It is."
Yeah.
And the way he continues to look at her just shows that it is mere infatuation.
Yeah.
There's not really anything else. I think he wants to love her. I think he can see a future with her because I don't feel bad in her presence. I feel like I can be myself. But that doesn't mean that's relationship material.
Right. And that is not where her head is, regardless.
Exactly. Yep.
Which it takes him a while to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So then we come to the end of the episode.
Yes.
Oh, wait, well, except for Mrs. Griffins finds them.
Yeah.
And is appalled that they're wading in the water. You know,
somebody might see you naked with your skirts up.
All of 3 inches, but whatever. And
they're in the water. You can't see it. So what I like about them wading in the water is that it's just Charlotte showing her that there is good to be found there. And I think that the whole reason, I don't think Charlotte was pulling her into the water so that, hey, this is good for you. I think she was pulling her into the water because she was trying desperately to show her some happiness. I think Charlotte understood Georgiana doesn't have a lot of happiness.
And have some
just
fun.
wanted to feel free. Yeah.
Right. And have some fun. And then that's the thing she says when she comes out of the
having
water.
Fun for the first time.
Yes, that's right.
And I think, okay, so then we get to the big finale that everyone is obsessed with. You can see that when Charlotte sees Sydney, she's confused, but she's attracted.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
not ashamed, but she's super awkward about it because
right. It takes her a split second to turn around.
Yes, it does. And then Sydney, his reaction, I like that when she says, "I assure you, you're the last person I ever wanted to encounter here," and he agrees that he must be the last person. I think that says more about how he feels about himself than about her in that moment, because of the way he agrees. And he says, "You're right. I spoke out of turn."
Oh, yeah, he did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know.
And then of course,
What a cliffhanger, though.
of course, at the end, his smirk when she goes running off. I think that it comes with an understanding that she liked what she saw. I think he's very well aware of that. But he also he's responding as her responding as she did confirmed that that she did have attraction to him. And I think
that she's paying attention.
Exactly. And I think that he understood that she didn't really understand what her reaction was, but I think that he was almost excited that she appreciated it.
Right.
Because he has that attraction for her. And up until then, there was no indication that she felt the same for him. He just kind of sees her as this beautiful woman who is feisty and spunky and has all these aspects that are attractive.
Right.
And then I think he likes that in the end.
Two things that I'm thinking of right now that we didn't discuss that I just want to bring up real quick. One of them is that when she says to him, when she walks away from him after they've had the discussion and he said, I don't care what you think or feel. And she says, well, I don't know why you go to pains to be so hurtful. Mm-hmm. When she walks away, have you ever watched that scene?
Where Tom pokes his head out and Stringer turns around.
And Stringer, they both look at her like, boy, she's mad.
Yeah.
Because the look on her face is not at all what the conversation she had with them. Mm-hmm. And I think that's priceless. That's a great advantage of watching this stuff more than once is that you see what the other actors, the actors are doing.
And when she, in that same note, when she goes down to talk to them and she calls out because she's talking with Stringer when she says, Mr. Parker. So she has to leave Stringer to go talk to him. Stringer's watching her. And when they had the conversation, Stringer's also watching her. And then when she walks away, he stops talking to Tom to turn and look at her.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tom, they both do.
I love that. Just one of them. The other thing that I wanted to discuss when I thought the time was going to run up, so I was trying to hurry and go through it. But when Tom was talking to Sydney, he says, I'm beset with worries. My workers need to be paid. So right then he confesses, I don't have the money to pay my workers.
Oh, I didn't really remember that he said my workers need to be paid.
He kind of glosses over it quick, but he says, I'm beset with worries.
Right.
My workers need to be paid. My Lady Denham has it in her power to ruin me.
Right. He put it all on that, not himself.
Yeah. He smushed it right in between them, but he confesses, I don't have the money to pay my workers. And then in episode 5, they're all like, what? You haven't paid your workers? Sydney knew. Yeah. He was told.
Well, but he really glossed over it.
He said it. So that was episode 2. We went through all the high points. We went through very detailed analysis of what happened. I think that I really like doing these recaps.
Yeah, it was fun. I really enjoyed it too.
I'm glad you did. All right, so I want to thank you. We've probably going to be about an hour and a half here. No, that's okay. I was talking to
cut it down.
I was talking to my sister-in-law about how I'm trying to keep it under an hour, and she said, actually, I like the longer ones in a podcast. So it's okay.
Okay, good.
I think all of our recaps will run long because we're discussing an entire episode. So, and the episode's 45 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
We're good.
Well, right. Why should we be shorter than the episode?
Exactly. So, Janice, I want to thank you for coming on and talking with me.
Well, thank you. And I will send you those links.
Yes, please do. And I'll be talking to you again. I'll send you a link when we do our next interview. All right.
Okay, you take care.
Bye, Janice.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
See, she was a wealth of knowledge, wasn't she? It was, again, I can't say what a joy it was to talk with Janice. It just felt like friends talking about something they loved together. So I know that you've gotten a lot out of that. Maybe, hopefully, you got some information or some perspectives that you weren't expecting or that you didn't think of when you watched the first time through. And by the way, I encourage you to watch it over and over and over again. And that's not just me saying that because I want you to be as obsessed as I am. I'm saying that because the more you watch it, the more you find it. And if you love Sanditon the way we do, you're going to enjoy it no matter what. So I encourage you to watch it. Watch the background things. Watch their facial expressions. Every time you watch it, find a different thing in the scene to look at. And you'll get a lot more out of it. Of course, if you are a normal person and only watch it every once in a while, you take a week to watch an entire 8 episodes, totally fine too. There's no judgment here. I know I'm a little obsessive. And I'm okay with that. I've made my peace with it. And one other thing I wanted to mention too is that when I do my recaps, I think you'll notice that Janice had to pull up some scenes that I had left out. So when I do recaps, typically what I do is I don't want to talk at you, like I said in the beginning, I don't want to talk at you for hours on end, because believe you me, I can talk for hours and hours and hours and never stop. As long as I have my water and my coffee, I'm good to go for a while. So what I do when I'm taking notes on it is I'm trying to pare down how many notes I'm taking to talk about. And I want to talk about the scenes where I can really dig deep into it. Now, admittedly, the first scene in Sanditon, episode 2, I probably should have brought up and I could have talked more into that. But I kind of glossed over that because I thought the more pertinent scene was the sermon. So that is what I do when I do recaps, is I don't necessarily go over every single detail like I did for the first recap, because when I do that and I'm by myself, I tend to go off on tangents and I will discuss what I think about that particular scene, which will remind me about another thing, which will remind me about another thing, and you see where I'm going with this. So I try to take out the most pertinent information, certainly the most important information that happened in the episode, but also things that I feel that I can really dig deeper into. So that is my methodology behind the recaps, and it really helps to have someone talking with me in an episode recap. 1, to keep me on task, but 2, to bring up the things that I didn't really see that I could go deeper. So it was really beneficial to have Janice there with me. I'm excited to talk with her again, and I'm excited to talk with you again. And if you saw how that went, easy breezy, right? So if you are a fan, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk with you. On that note, we're going to head off, and we will see you in a week. Have a great week, guys. We'll see you soon.